Hey everybody, it's a wonderful day and we've got the information that we need from the PFMC March Council meeting. Is there going to be a good 2026 salmon season recreationally, commercially? Is there going to be an inland season? Follow to find out soon. Hey everybody, it's James Stone here, Executive Director, President of NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association, and we're coming to you today to talk specifically on Monday about all the different things that transpired over the salmon season at the March PFMC Council. I'm going to start covering some things for the Sacramento and the Klamath season, and I will cover all four sectors of the KMZ, Fort Bragg, San Francisco, and Monterey. And then I will briefly mention the commercial stuff and briefly talk about inland. But most of this complete review will be moved over to our YouTube channel so that you guys can have complete access to it there if you were unable to make this live video and don't want to watch the live video to its entirety. You'll be able to skip back and forth on our YouTube channel. So make sure you go over to the NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association YouTube channel, smash the subscribe button. That way you get notified for everything that is going on for salmon. So everybody's joining in right now, so let me wait a few seconds till I get underway. I see everybody joining in and logging in, so good morning, everyone, and hopefully you'll find a lot of great information in this. I was planning on trying to come to you all live earlier in the week from the council, but there was just a lot of moving parts that were transpiring, and so it was really hard for me to go into all of the specific details because there were so many different pieces and parts changing and moving, which doesn't always happen at the council. Sometimes it's very straightforward. You're given a certain amount of, escapement and a certain amount of abundance, and then you can move forward. So we'll see how, this was a lot different of a year. So good morning, Chris. Good morning, John. Hope you guys are doing well up there in Redding. I hope we've got a little over 20-something people on here so far, so we will start getting underway. But I was kind of explaining how different it was this year at the council because of some, really hard curtailments and quotas and in-season management, as they call it, which is new to everyone that has ever planned fisheries for salmon off the Pacific coast. The only strict, hard quotas that have ever been done in the ocean have been in the Klamath Management Zone, the California side, and the Klamath Management Zone on the Oregon side is where the only times we've seen quotas. And then we've also seen a lot of quotas up in Washington. But as far as the rest of Oregon and the rest of California, we've never seen quota fisheries from a recreational standpoint. And from a commercial standpoint, it's new due to the overperformance and some of the worries of what's happened in the past of not being able to model. The model basically just doesn't accurately depict what's going on. So good morning, Kyle. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for the GM this morning. But as far as we get into this model to kind of really explain to you all kind of like what's transpiring is like in the old days, you used to just take that abundance number, minus out the escapement number on the Sacramento plus 14% for the inland fishery. And then the next thing you know, it was, you were able to utilize those fish and you were able to harvest all the way down to that very last fish. Whereas that typically is the same way the model still works today. However, as I've mentioned to you all, there's so many other different constraining factors. You have the ESA listed winter run. You have the ESA listed coastal Chinook. You have the Klamath harvest model, which manages the natural spawners and doesn't allow you to include hatchery fish into the Klamath system. So that's a whole different, system, the way that it's managed. And then on top of all of that, then you have sunk coho. SONCC, if you might hear me say that, SONCC, or see that acronym, stands for Southern Oregon, Northern California Coho. So that was One of the more recent stocks that has been not only endangered, but is a species of concern for extirpation and, possible, wiping out of complete cohorts on those cohos. So a lot of you might say, well, we don't catch coho. We can't legally catch them inland. We can't legally catch them in the ocean. So why should we be penalized? Well, that's not always the case. Last year during the 2-day opener, there were multiple coho that were turned in from people that thought that they were catching Chinook. Even professional operations had coho on their deck in pictures that were on social media and others. So, I don't think that everybody that is out there knows exactly the difference between coho and Chinook, or are paying attention when fish are flopping like crazy and you have, 8, 9, 10 fish hooked up at a time. So the reason that we get penalized on the coho is just simply due to that we often in the ocean, we get into coho accidentally and unintentionally, and a few coho get caught. Well, the way the model works is the federal model works is that when we open a day in a certain sector, it tells you how many impacts you will have on coho, because it will tell you how many you'll accidentally hook and that will die from mortality. I don't know if that number has been updated, and I apologize. I forgot to ask the modelers about that, because I did promise all of you that I would ask that next time I was with Dr. O'Farrell. I did forget to ask that. However, I did get the new charts out for Sonk coho. They are in the review for ocean fisheries, so you can review it there at pcouncil.org, and that document is there. He pointed me to the detailed exploitation rates of the tribes, which primarily harvest, all of the coho. The only coho that we are considered harvesting are the ones that we accidentally catch and die from hook and mortality. I know 10 years ago they were telling me that rate was around 25%, but I think that it's been moved up, and I don't have an exact number for you in the model, but I believe that it's closer to that 30-35% rate, which would be in 1 in 3. So every time that you open a day in the ocean and we go fishing, if 3 coho are caught, hooked, and released, one of them is reported as a mortality. And so because of, different things, not only are they not as hardy as Chinook, but they often lose their scales, and when they get into a net or they hit a deck, they often become terminal. So be cautious of what you're all doing out there, but the model is accurately predicting that. It doesn't matter kind of exactly what happens in real life, because the model's already predicting that mortality. So you can't really stop it by saying, hey, we caught 9 coho today and none died, we let them all go. Although that's a great thing, that's not the way the model works. So hopefully we can revisit that at a later date when we have more fishing opportunity and time to dig into some of these other fisheries that we don't engage in but do affect us. And I'll make you all that promise that I will continue to do that and continue to work on that. So good morning, Jose. Hope you're doing well. I see that. Anyone else, if you have any comments or anything, throw them in the chat and I'll get going on it. But for the 60 of you that are online right now watching, I'm going to kind of go through. I've got all of the dates and everything that's kind of there for the recreational season. I haven't connected with George yet. I know that they're on the floor, and I know the entire SAS is leaving today from Sacramento, and they're headed all back home. And then your next step will be to review all of these dates that are going to come out today. They will be posted to pcouncil.org. If you don't see them there, go to NorCal Guides and Sportsmen Association Facebook page. They'll be here, and then we'll post them on our website as well. So hopefully you guys will be able to follow along and see all the dates and everything that will be officially being released today. So as I just mentioned, one of the different things compared to all other years, 2022 and prior, was, as I mentioned, we have a preseason forecast. We have an escapement minimum number that has to be met, and that's normally on the SAC 122,000 to 180,000, and then everything in between can be harvested. Well, that has changed a little bit because the harvest control rule, because of the amount of harvest that has transpired over the past 15 years, and that is all, generally going above what the model is predicting. They came out with a new harvest control rule line, which tells you basically however much abundance is there, you go up on the y-axis of how much exploitation you can do. And the maximum used to be in the high 60s. I believe it was like 68% on that harvest control rule that you could get to. So whatever the abundance was, you could go out and harvest 68% of that exploitation, of that harvest. So every 100 fish that exist in the ocean, you could kill 68. Well, they found that that was too much and that was too many because the model wasn't always accurately predicting those 100 fish, right? Sometimes that model was 30 to 40% off, historically 31% off. And so those 100 fish that they said existed, really 69 only existed. And if we're allowing you to kill 68 out of those supposedly 100 fish, you can start seeing where problems can start arising. And that's kind of what happened in 2022 is kind of, we saw this kind of happening real time. And SAS members were mentioning this in 2020, 2021, and then in 2022, I'm all, this whole thing is messed up. It's all going to blow up the model. And I even had told the guys in the SAS with me, I said, go ahead and just blow it up because they don't get it. They don't understand what's happening because they were allowing us to go into sectors and they were highlighting this area as green, that we were clear, we could go fishing in this area and it wouldn't affect impacts. And this area was red and we shouldn't fish there or we're going to hit the ESA listed impacts. This area is yellow, so on and so forth. So they highlighted it a stoplight chart, which works in a lot of different types of management, but it's not the best for moving into, finalizations of a seasons because they're fish. They can swim anywhere. And so in 2022, a lot of the managers and the SAS chose areas that were green and highlighted because they didn't have a lot of impacts. But guess what? They did. We went into all those green zones, provided all that great opportunity in 2022, and you all caught tons of winter run. Coastal Chinook was the big one, age 4, coastal Chinook, Eel River fish, Russian River fish, those fish that are coming off the coast. And then there was also a lot of Klamath fish being caught, which, since the dams have come out, are a huge species of special concern to make sure that we're getting back as many fish into this new habitat. So anyhow, hopefully that kind of gives you a little background. I know that wasn't enough. I'm going to do a full detailed background drop on YouTube, and I'm going to do ocean sac, ocean McCollum, ocean Klamath. So look for the 3-part series coming up on YouTube that I'll be releasing here in the next couple of weeks. It will all come out before the end of this month, before the new council meeting and setting of final seasons. But just to get back to how this process works, you have the salmon information meeting every year in February. You have the first PFMC week-long council meeting, which just transpired. Today is the last day, to where the SAS will recommend 3 alternatives, 1, 2, and 3. Normally 1 being the most liberal, 3 being the most conservative. However, it doesn't always have to be that way. It just has to be a book range of alternatives and ideas of range of dates. So when I read you these dates that are rough, it doesn't mean these are the dates. So don't take these dates for the ocean salmon that I'm reading right now and then put them on your Facebook like we saw people do last year and say, booking salmon these dates. Because if you do that, there's a chance that in the April meeting that these dates can change a little bit. This is just allowing you to understand how many dates that you probably will get. So, roughly looking at these dates in certain areas, it's going to be hard to get, access to every single fishery completely. But some of these alternatives are opened up differently because of the impacts that they have on the ESA listed fish. So I want you to understand that. The number one constraining stock, as we forecasted to you all months and months ago, was going to be the Klamath. It's going to be the Klamath this year, next year, and in 2028 for sure. It has the lowest amount of stock. It has the most constraining factor of their age 4 fish, which are the surrogate for the coastal Chinook. So we should expect to see constraining stock of the Klamath affecting our fishing on the Sacramento stocks these next couple years. And I know that that's frustrating for a lot of you. We just got out of a 3-year closure because of the SAC and partially because of the Klamath. But now here we are. The SAC is starting to rebound. We're getting out of that hole. And yet, getting out of that hole, it's still keeping us in a hole because it's not going to be wide open fishing. It's not going to be a wide open season recreationally, commercially, or inland. So I think that that's important for you all to understand. It's important to understand that there's, in the ocean, it's a mixed stock fishery. So every time you drop your rod into, look at, I got my turkey hook from, so there we go. There's a big old grapple hook for turkey deep frying. Every time you drop your hook into the ocean and something grabs it, you don't know what you're pulling out, right? But there's my analogy. So you're dropping the hook in, boom, fish grabs it the first time. Oh, that's a fall run sackfish. Next time you drop your hook down, boom, grabs it. Oh, that's a Klamath fish. That's not good. That just took time off the water. Oh, another winter run fish just grabbed it and we just harvested the winter run. That counts against us. That's not good. So that's what it means on a mixed stock fishery. So hopefully that just analogy, that little demonstration that was not planned, made a little sense to you. And that way you understand that when you dip your hooks into the ocean in a mixed stock fishery, you can't actively target a certain stock. Whereas the only way that you can do that is in an inland fishery where you can target a certain stock that might be far more abundant than the neighboring river or the neighboring inland watershed. So a great example of this is the Sacramento has been, the main stem has been the biggest constraint of the whole system. And that's why they allowed a little fishing on the feather and the American last year, but none on the main stem of the Sacramento. So where do I see all this coming together? How do I see all this playing out? As always, that process I started to mention, I got sidetracked. You have the salmon information meeting in February, the first full week of council, which we just went through. Then you will go through a public comment period, which this year it's on March 23rd in person in Santa Rosa. And you can show up there and advocate for recreation or for commercial ocean fisheries. And then it will go to the second week in Portland, which is I think it's April 7th to the 14th is that week. I think the SAS meets in Portland on the 7th of April. And then I will be headed up there the midweek and the weekend of that. So the first 3-4 days of that. And that's where you take all three alternatives and combine them into one option. So that's that process. Then on April 14th, it will be decided on the seasons. Then they take that immediately that week, I believe, or it might be the week right after, but it's immediate. Within a week, they take that to the Fish and Game Commission in the state of California to bless that for inside of 3 miles of the coast for the California salmon fishing season. And the council is blessing the international waters outside. And that's how that season's process gets set. Then from there, the recommendations are made for inland fishing to the commission, and then those are adopted 3 to 4 weeks later at the May teleconference commission meeting, because that gives enough time for some public comment there for the inland seasons, and that won't be set until May 6th this year. So for all of you that are wondering, when am I going to know what the actual seasons are? April 14th, ocean seasons will be set. May 6th, inland seasons will be set 100%. But I'm going to give you the closest that I can to what I know and how I think it's going to play out. So are you all ready? So here we go. I'm going to kind of give you some of the ocean seasons. So there are quotas that are basically going to be set in the ocean, and these aren't exact numbers, but they're roughly close. So a rough range of around 60,000 to 62,000 fish for the commercial fleet will be allocated this year to be caught. Now, you might say, well, we thought we were going to have more, and I did too, as far as available fish. And are those fish available to the commercial fleet? Yes, in the Sacramento, there are more than 60,000 total Sacramento fish available. However, they are running this off the all stocks total. So they are only allowing around that many fish to be harvested from the commercial fleet total, because they feel that once the commercial fleet hits over 60,000 fish, roughly, give or take, small buffer, but once they hit around that number, they feel that the model is saying that they will hit the maximum number of the ESA listed stocks, the Klamath fish, which is our constraining factor, right? So that's what that is basically saying. And they're saying in the recreational side that quota will be 63,400 fish max. So this is one of the first times in a long time, not always or forever, but generally speaking, vast majority of times, the commercial fleet has way more fish to harvest in the ocean than the recreational fleet. And you might say, well, you just said that the rec fleet's going to probably get a bigger quota in the ocean this year of, a few thousand more fish. How is that possible? Because the recreational fleet does not impact Klamath age 4 fish, which are the surrogate for the coastal Chinooks, as do the commercial fleet. When you look at the commercial fleet's impacts and how much they actually physically impact the age 4 ESA listed fish, they catch a lot more of them. They show up in their fisheries more. And that's typically, that hasn't been proven. However, there's thought process behind a little of it. One is that they fish deeper, and they don't fish as much on the beach in between 40 to 80 feet. Often they could be fishing, upwards of, 30, 40 fathoms, 50 fathoms if they want. And there's deep reef fishing out there to which they could be impacting or catching some of those fish more. But it's historically known that when there's a winter run problem for ESA, that's a recreational issue to solve. And that's why Monterey, folks, you remember having your seasons whacked and cut really bad in the past. Because if it's a winter run issue, if you ever hear me say we're in trouble with the winter run, you're going to know that the Monterey sector is going to be in the worst shape out there. Now, if I say it's a Klamath problem, you know that the KMZ and that upper area of the state is going to be more in trouble. So hopefully that explains those differences. But out of those two, when it's a Klamath age 4, it's generally a commercial fleet issue to handle and to solve because their impacts are so far greater. So, excuse me. Felt like I'm going to sneeze. Anyway, sorry everybody. When we're talking a recreational issue, that is down in the winter run sector where the winter run fish are, which is normally south of San Francisco, south of the Golden Gate Bridge. So it kind of gives you the start of the quotas, and then I can kind of run you in the seasons and the shapes. Copy, George, I'll call you. So George is on here right now, so I know he's finalizing his seasons and everything. So that will hopefully kind of explain to you guys that are out there of, how those seasons are set. And then you've also got the Sonk coho, as I mentioned, which is an ESA listed, factor, and how that's going to affect And I think that the SAS did such a great job working with CDFW and others and the tribes to try to find a way to get some impacts. So we could try to find some fish. But, total, it looks like there's around 120, 130,000 fish to harvest. If you looked at just the straight model run without any constraining factors of when you look at any, if you were to look at any of the other stocks in the historical past, like I said, you would just take the sac abundance, the sac floor, and then you would just minus that out, and then you would see the total harvestable fish. But it sounds like they're putting constraints and quotas on both fleets and then on individual sectors. So the rec fleet has shared with me their kind of individual sectors, and the commercial fleet will have their daily trips, or their weekly trips, which will be set by NIMS. And I know that the commercial fleet's been fighting really hard for all you commercial fishermen out there to have some type of season to where you can go out there and actually catch enough fish to make it worth your time, because it costs thousands of dollars to get your boats ready. So I think that that's, the hard work that's been done by the SAS and your fleet representatives doesn't go unnoticed. So make sure you reach out to them and you support all of them, because they're out there spending 7 days in a hotel room fighting for all of you. But it's really important just to notice and understand that these quotas have been put in place because of constraining factors of the other Klamath stocks, so that we don't catch too many age 4 Klamath fish. Now, the rec fleet does catch some age 4 Klamath fish, which is the constraining factor, and that's why there are a lot of concerns of the rec fleet in certain zones like the KMZ and Fort Bragg and in San Francisco, especially like July timeline. July had the biggest impacts on Klamath fish compared to anything else that's out there. When you look at the modeling of impacts, San Francisco in July is the most expensive to open up. So one day in July was like 20 Klamath impacts. And so that goes to show you, like in Monterey, that was for recreation that I was mentioning. Recreational fishing, one day open in July is 20 Klamath impacts to open that up. Whereas in Monterey, you can open up a whole day in April for 1 Klamath impact, right? And 0 Klamath impacts in May, 0 Klamath impacts in June, 0 Klamath impacts in July, 0 Klamath impacts in August. So you understand what I'm saying now. And so when you open the model, and like they did for the first round 1, the recreational fleet, they added a day in every time zone just to open it, as I mentioned, so that you could all see how much time and how much impacts that this could all create. And so if you start looking at these numbers of, the rec around a 60,000 plus, harvest of all stocks, then you're looking at, somewhere around the KMZ is going to be roughly in their quota between 3,100 and 3,900 roughly is the estimate. Somewhere between Fort Bragg will be 4,400 sackfish to 5,100 sackfish. San Francisco will be somewhere between 31,000 and 34,000 sackfish. And then Monterey will be somewhere between 21,000 to 22,000 roughly. Somewhere in the 21,000s roughly is where the estimates are coming in for Monterey. So if you add all 4 of those numbers up, you'll get around those 60,000 numbers for the recreational fleet of where they'll be. KMZ, the times, and these could change briefly, and these are just estimates of the dates. These are not final season dates. So KMZ Alt 1 was June 20th to July 19th, and then August 1st to August 23rd. Alt 2 was June 13th to July 19th, a little bit more time. And then the same dates in August with an extra week to August 31st. Alt 3 was 627 to 75, and 712 to 823. So a little bit different dates in alt 3. Out of those, the model says that you'll catch the most sackfish in alt 2 for the KMZ. So roughly that looks like in alt 2, it looks about at least about 6 to 7 weeks of fishing, based on these numbers in the KMZ. So it looks like 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, about 5 to 6 weeks in the KMZ. So I think that's some really good opportunity. I think the SAS did a really good job there, providing some opportunity in the toughest zone that's out there, because that zone is basically squashed for effort because of the way that those clammy fish come in. Once effort goes up, that catch rate goes up so fast, and as I just mentioned, it's so expensive to fish in some of these zones. The KMZ is very expensive to fish in the zone in certain times, but obviously San Francisco is the most expensive because the effort is so high. So the more people you have in a zone, the more expensive it gets to fish in the model. Fort Bragg, alt 1, dates that were put in yesterday and seem to be confirmed today are alt 1, 620 to 719, and 81 to 823, the same as alt 1 for KMZ. Alt 2, 613 to 719, 81 to 831. And then the same for alt 3, 627 to 75, 712 to 823. So that's the same as the KMZ, alt 1, 2, and 3. And Fort Bragg, those quotas, as I mentioned, are somewhere between 44 to 5,100. It is showing the most dates would be in the alt 2. Sorry, mixed stock. Thanks, George. So yeah, mixed stock total. Sorry, I keep saying sack, but George is correcting me. It's mixed stock. So that's the total mixed stock off the Sacramento harvest model. Sorry, George. Thank you for correcting me there. So that's 63,000 fish roughly is mixed stock. So those quotas that I'm saying are all fish caught. So is what George is saying right now through the thing to me. So those totals could be, so if you were to take Fort Bragg and you have 5,000 fish to catch in Fort Bragg, that'd be 5,000 total fish, mixed stock. Then it gets closed. But out of that 5,000, they're not all Sacramento fish, even though they're using the Sacramento harvest model. They could be Klamath fish, Oregon fish, coastal Chinook, McCallamy fish. They could be from different watersheds out of those 5,000 fish. But once we hit the 5,000, that area would close. So that is important to know that they are using the Sacramento harvest model, but the numbers of the quota are mixed stock fishery. So same thing when you're in the ocean. As I mentioned, the grappling hook demonstration, you can't determine how many fish you're pulling out that are just Sacramento real time. That would be awesome if we could just wand them and go one off the sack, one off the Klamath, but that doesn't work that way. So the model is modeling it that way, that if we do a mixed stock fishery in the ocean and we reach these numbers of 5,000 fish in the Fort Bragg, that will basically be the maximum exploitation of the ESA listed constraints. San Francisco that they put up yesterday, the numbers were alt 1, 620 to 719, and then 823. And then we have alt 2, 516 to 528. It's a May timeline. And then 613 to 75. And then 81 to 831. And then alt 3 was June 27th to 75. And 712 to 823. So alt 2 definitely has the most time. Again, although it shows that the most fish will be caught in alt 3 because of the time that was selected. So that's 34,000 fish, and alt 3 could be caught mixed stock. So McCallamy, Sac, Klamath, all of those. So out of those dates there, so if you now know what you can advocate for if you like those in the San Francisco zones. You will get, as I mentioned, somewhere between around 31 to 34,000 mixed stock quota in that sector this year. but it depends on what times you want. If you want some May timeline, then you can have some May timeline, but you'll lose some of the, it looks like you'll lose some of the June timeline, and you'll have more August time. So depending on where you want, and this is solely for the summer fishery, and then Monterey is the most liberal out of the recreational fleet, and the quotas there are anywhere from 21,300 to 21,800, and 21,300, 21,800, and those dates, Alt 1 are 4/11 through 8/31, Alt 2, 4/11 through 8/23, and Alt 3, 4/11 through 8/16. So as I mentioned earlier, when you look at the model and you look at just the impacts of the Klamath on the model, you will start seeing how expensive it is in certain areas for those Klamath fish, as I mentioned earlier. And there are it's like one impact in April to open April fisheries per day in Monterey, but the May, June, July, August timeline, there's 0 impacts. So that's why you're going to see the most open season in that Monterey. However, with that being mentioned, that's different than it ever has been, because there's a cap quota on the top of that sector of, as I mentioned, it looks like the maximum 21,800 fish, mixed stock. So as soon as 21,800 fish are caught in that sector recreationally, then that sector could close, is the way that I understand it right now. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions between now and April, because this is a newer style management of having dates, but then a cap. So if you hit that cap, then the rest of the dates are foreseeded, just like last year, how we had the 2 dates in June, and then we lost the rest of the dates in July and August because we hit the quota right out of the first 2 days. So it will be important, since we are still on recreational quotas, that if you want to get out there, that you would be able to get out there and get fishing, earlier in the season to at least gain some access and have some opportunity. So for all of you that are fishing Monterey, I recommend that you are going to try to go fishing in the April, May timeline to get some fish. And then, same goes for the San Francisco, could open in May, as the earliest date I see here is May 16th. I think that was done probably to keep a 20-inch size limit, because before May 16th, you have to go 24-inch size limit on all of our kings. So I think that you've got the 20-inch size limit there in San Francisco, so you might have a couple of weeks in May. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at a June opener, it looks like, in San Francisco. And then in Fort Bragg, it looks like you're going to have a June opener for the KMZ and Fort Bragg sectors. In both of those areas, looks like you will be opening in June sometime in there. The earliest of June 13th, the latest of June 27th. And it looks like you'll have a little August timeline and maybe some July timeline, depending on how they are able to move all of the dates around. But hopefully that gives you enough. And then I'll explain more, and I'm going to try to break it down, as I mentioned, into 3 fisheries of Sac, Klamath, and McCallum, San Joaquin, so that you guys can just have real focuses and watch 3 individual videos on YouTube to try to understand how that works for each of those systems, and what rivers and what watersheds and what contribution rates are contributing to our fishery. So I see a couple of questions in here, and then I'll answer them and try to go back. But we have a couple of people mentioning the inland tribal fisheries. We don't monitor, the state of California and the federal government do not monitor any of the tribal fisheries at all. We have no jurisdiction. It's all self-reporting. They report what they catch to the federal government, and then they put it into the review of ocean fisheries for us to read. So that is outside of anyone's jurisdiction and control of those fisheries. We can only control the non-tribal fisheries, which out of the Klamath is 50% of the harvestable surplus. And so this year, working backwards, which is the way that we always work in the model, is you find the most constraining factor, which was the Klamath. You find out how many natural spawners you had. As I mentioned in my last video, it roughly showed that we had around 10,000 natural spawners. to play with. And then when you divide that up, about 5,032 fish, I believe it was, each. The tribe should be allowed to harvest 5,032 fish, and we should be allowed to harvest 5,032 fish. Off the top of that comes the Klamath quota for the river, right off the top, that 15%. So you roughly have around 751 fish, 752 fish, roughly right there for the start of the quota. And then any of additional fish that aren't deemed harvestable by the ocean will then roll into the river quota fishery. And so that number will go up this year. It doesn't always go up, but anytime that the ocean fisheries, commercial and rec, can't catch their harvestable surplus, then the state automatically rolls that into the river quota, and that allows a little bit extra river harvest, which is nice because, as you know, 700 fish are not much. So it's really difficult to judge that and always get it, precise. Anyway, so moving forward, I saw a couple people were asking me commercial. I know George might still be on here. George, if you're on here and you want to type in the chat what your dates are, or you can. If not, I'll talk to you later, and I'll do another update for all of you for commercial. But what I've heard is that last that I had talked to George was that they were working on multiple dates to try to move the fleet away from those, areas that were of heavy concern, which is the Klamath, as I mentioned earlier in this live, that the Klamath age 4 are the surrogate for the coastal Chinook. The coastal Chinook, which is a 16% exploitation rate, had to be buffered down to 8-point-something percent, 8.6 or 8.8%. So that 8% buffer rate is like half. So you can only model to half of the season that you actually want to obtain that's out there, plus these hard stop quotas. So I don't know the exact dates that George had put out there, if they had changed. I know that the last couple rounds, they were looking at some dates and mainly focusing a lot in Monterey in the May timeline for commercial. And then they were looking at some other zones in the June timeline, I believe. And then there was alternative 3 had a quota fishery in the KMZ with the rest of the zones closed. And so I think that you'll see the same thing George is doing, is creating bookmarks. So a far end and a far end, so that by April they can weave anywhere in between the two. So just remember that, everybody, recreationally and commercially, that these are bookends. The Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 3. Just because you say, I want Alt 2, I want Alt 2, that doesn't mean those dates are going to be exactly what they are in Alt 2. It just means that that's a range of dates that you could have to make the model work. So whatever the SAS decided to do as the earliest date in the model will be your bookend of your earliest possible opener. So if you're trying to plan your spring and your summer right now, and you fish out recreationally out of KMZ or Fort Bragg, well, you're not going to be fishing in May, and you're not going to be fishing the first week of June, because the earliest that the opener could be would be June 13th. So that would be the best way for you to, judge how to make your plans. If you're in San Francisco, it's a different situation. You don't know if your boat needs to be ready by May 16th, because that could be the early opener, or if it's going to kick back a month later into June. Depends what everyone makes on public comment. Depends on what everyone makes at the April meeting for public comment through the council process. And then Monterey, it looks like all 3 alternatives say 411, which has a 24-inch size limit down there to help protect the winter run. So it looks like, but there is also a 20-inch in here on Alt 3, so they could do a 20-inch if the winter run constraints are not a factor. But I would assume that you would see, if Monterey opens up on 411 recreationally, I would assume that you would see from 411 to roughly May 15th, a 24-inch size limit minimum. And then after May 15th, you might see a 20-inch size limit. The reason that's done is to try to prevent catching those winter run adults that might be moving moving in, or as 2-year-olds to protect them for the next following year. So hopefully that kind of helps explain some of those things. I haven't got also commercially, I haven't heard back from George yet on a trip limit, but I will be giving him a call right after this and talking to him about where their trip limits came in. I know that I was in the room as the state was saying that it was going to be 50 to 60 fish, and that was just unacceptable to the commercial representatives that were there fighting for you. They've been sitting in the rooms all week trying to gain some type of access so that bigger boats could actually go fishing this year, even though that there are going to be major constraints and limitations on some of those fisheries. But it looks like overall, somewhere that they are planning on harvesting around 125 to 130,000 roughly, all stocks, mixed stock fishery fish in the ocean. And then you might ask, well, what does that mean? And this is the weird part, because if you look at 392,000 Sacramento fish that are out there, and the escapement has to be 188,000, well, that right there tells you in your head, well, we have 200,000 fish that we should be able to basically go harvest if you're doing simple math. And that's Sacramento only. Then you have, there's probably 50 to 60,000 McCollum fish out there. So now you're saying, oh, there's 250,000 fish that we should be able to harvest out there. And that there's the 5,000 Klamath fish, and then some Oregon stocks, and then some coastal stocks. So you start looking at, man, there could be 275,000 fish out there that we could technically harvest if we caught them all correctly. The problem is that we haven't been catching them correctly. And so the federal government, like I mentioned, I'm going to do the hook thing again. The hook goes down, and the way that we've been pulling them out of the ocean has been leading to that we cannot get to all of those Sacramento fish before we harvest too many of those Klamath age 4s. And so they are limiting us to stop fishing once those Klamath age 4 hit, which they believe will be when we hit these quota numbers. So I don't know where the future goes from this, and I don't want to leave you all hanging. I'm being upfront and truthful as to the best of my ability to try to give you the data to understand it. However, it's a very confusing thing, even for people dealing with it on a daily basis, about where this future goes. I would hope to think that once we get through this year, that those constraints of the buffer that is put on the age 4 Klamath of that 8%, which is half of the total of the 16% exploitation rate, I'm hoping that buffer will be lightened and removed, hopefully, which will give more access to the commercial fleet to go access those Sacramento fish. And then same goes with the other constraining factors of winter run and sonk coho, so that hopefully we have more access for everyone to go fishing. So for those of you, 80 of you that are hanging on still, I'll move into the river real quick, and I'll kind of cover the rivers of where we're thinking. I know I kind of just covered the Klamath. It looks like it'll be about a 750 fish quota, and then you're going to say, well, how many of the Klamath fish are they not going to be able to catch? And that could be a few thousand fish. So I don't know where those numbers are yet. We'll basically have to wait until we get the final dates today and the final output of the model, and then we'll be able to backtrack the math and work our way to see how many Klamath fish are probably not going to be able to be accessed. We won't have an exact quota total until April 14th, once the council process is done, just like every year. But we can kind of guesstimate here by the end of the day, today, tomorrow, we'll be able to guess where that quota will generally fall, roughly speaking. So hopefully that number does get at least doubled. As many of you know, that when we're looking at a quota of 750 fish, 400 fish, which has been the quota on the Klamath a few years, that's very little opportunity. Even with a 1 adult, 1 jack limit, it goes very fast. So we want to try to extend that opportunity for the communities, for the economic input, and the river communities and everyone else that the guides and everyone that rely on that fishery. But moving into the Sacramento, what is that going to mean? Well, yeah, Jason Thatcher, that's exactly right. The fact that we're not targeting 122,000 fish, and we are moving towards targeting that upper 180,000 line is so important for the future of the Sacramento. As you all know, the Sacramento collapsed, and if we continue to model down to that minimum number of 122,000, we are going to fully collapse and lose our fishery completely. I think that it was apparent to some, but it wasn't apparent to all. And we had sent a lot of shots across the bows and warnings about, that was too low of a number to harvest all the way down to, and that we are going to, have problems and closures because of it. And now here we are. We just went through those closures. So now here we are out of it, out of a 3-year closure. And what does that mean? So on the upper end of the range of the 180,000 generally means that you'll have, fish back to, according to the Sacramento Work Group, you'll have enough fish back to actually get all of our eggs at our hatcheries more consistently, instead of when we were at 122 or targeting 130 or 140. We typically weren't even getting all of our eggs at our hatcheries. It's just not enough fish. It doesn't provide a recreational fishery at all either. So targeting 180,000, I think will, if the model's accurate, 180,000 can provide a small recreational fishery. It can allow people to catch a few fish in the watersheds and provide enough fish to get all of our eggs back at all of our hatcheries and move forward into the next 3-year cycle. So that's kind of where that's at. So this year on the Sac River, the same thing will happen just like the Klamath, whereas more fish will be sent in. They won't necessarily come to the river quota, but they will go into escapement. So the river quota minimum was 188,000 for the actual escapement number. And then depending on where the Fish and Game Commission and inland fisheries end up, they will determine how many fish that we are allowed to catch inland. And we'll be working on that when we get closer to you all. But typically we can't even catch all of our typical historical harvest amount, and we typically can't even catch our quota. We didn't even catch half of our quota last year. So it goes to show you that you need to have a lot of fish in the river system in order for fishing to be good or, successful for the average angler. They're a lot harder to catch in the river than they are in the ocean, because in the ocean they're feeding consistently, whereas when they get into the river they're stop feeding, and it's more of an aggression bite, territorial bite. Once you start entering the migratory spawning ground areas, until you get up to the actual spawning ground areas. So hopefully that makes sense to a lot of you to understand that, of why it's so hard to catch fish inland compared to out in the ocean. So I would estimate that you're going to see, over 250,000 fish return to the Sacramento River this year, is my guess this morning after doing some light math. I will tell you that I got that number from adding 188,000 minimum escapement plus the typical 14% river run size, which the model did, which is roughly right around 25,000 fish. And so you add those fish all in, you're right around, 212,000. And then you start looking at how many fish are not going to be able to be caught out of the 392,000. Well, if they're accurate in their modeling and they're targeting, on a high side of 140,000 fish total mixed stock fishery, and you're taking that and then you minus out, the Klamath sector, let's say, just for easy math right now, this isn't accurate, what I'm about to say, I'm just giving you easy math. But if there's 140,000 fish, and you say that, 5% of those are, out of all 140,000, 5% are going to be Klamath. Okay, so that's like 7,000 fish. And then you say, like 3,000 will be winter run. Well, that's 3,000. That's 10,000 fish out of 140. Now you have 130,000 left. And then you say, McCollum is going to be 40% of your catch rate. Well, then that would be roughly, 40 to 50,000 McCollum fish possibly out of that. And you minus those out. You're only, if we max out everything and all the commercial catches their quota and all of the rec catches their quota, you're going to be left with like 80 to 90,000 Sacramento fish being caught out of that 140,000. So if that's, rough math, and those numbers are not accurate, I'm just spitballing here, but if that is the way that contribution of the whole pie, of the whole 140,000 mixed stock, and you break it into McCollum pie, Sac pie, Klamath pie, coastal pie, and you break all of that down, it's around 92,000 fish roughly get caught out of the Sacramento in a rough model. Just a first look, first glance, and that could all change depending on where all of the people set their area, time, area, place, right? And that's the important thing to realize, is that depending on what dates get set, depend on how you impact all the other stocks. If the McCollum fish are all sitting off San Francisco right in May 16th, then maybe you harvest more McCollum fish in May. If all of the winter run are sitting in Monterey right in April, and we open in April, man, we might catch too many winter run too fast. However, the quotas are set for the Sacramento stocks, the quotas are set for the all stocks of the mixed stock fishery. So it's not just counting Sacramento or winter or McCollum or Klamath fish. It's counting all the fish. So if you do math now and you say 392,000, you minus out 92,000 to be easy numbers, it's possible, it's very possible you could see 300,000 Sacramento fish return this year. I mean, it could happen in the Sacramento, which would be the biggest return in 13 to 14 years. It would be 2012 and 13 when we had those types of returns. And that's only happened since 2007. That's only happened twice in 20 years where we've had returns of that big, of that magnitude. Now, interesting enough, some people might say 300,000 fish, that's incredible. Well, yes, it is if you're, 25 years old and you've never seen more than 300,000 fish in the river. I'll step back and say, for those of us that remember what it was like to fish in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s until 2004, there were many years to where we were seeing 250, 300, 400, 500, and all the way up to 775,000 adults in the Sacramento River alone, of Sacramento stocks only. So that goes to show you how much, how much availability there actually could be out there for inland. But what that would mean for inland is, although that we would be able to target some of those fish, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we're going to rebuild. And if we do get 250,000 escapement, 300,000 escapement, I mean, you're talking a full rebuilding of this system. So if this would start rebuilding, this is going to create, with water, you could have an unbelievable 2029 season where it just takes off and it goes like this. Huge. I mean, you put 300,000, 250,000 fish back in the Sacramento River, and they spawn with good water and the hatcheries go full bore, you're going to have a huge 2029 in this. And so that's what this is all about. And that's what we've all been preaching for so many years, is that, we have to make sure that we're thinking about the future and protecting us all to have sustainable fisheries, keeping us all afloat industry-wise, but as recreational anglers, making sure that everyone understands of how the system works and how we go out there to harvest fish. So I'll kind of answer a few questions for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to bounce. So put your questions in the chat. I got a couple of questions in here now that I'll mention. And if you didn't get, I'm going to start at David Munoz, and then I'll go down. But add your question to the comments. And if you haven't got your information, go to YouTube channel, smash the subscribe button. You'll get notified, and I'll be posting up more videos here this week and next week, kind of breaking down the SAC, just the SAC without going into tangents on the other systems. I'll explain just the Klamath. I'll explain just the San Joaquin, so that you have those three systems and you have a full understanding of them. I'll probably try to do a coastal video too. But remember that under the council process, we're only managed under the Sacramento system and the Klamath system. Only two systems are how we're managed. But I'll go through some of these comments now and answer them. David, I guess the promising jack number returns are not being considered. This whole thing is so frustrating. Yeah, that's a good comment. Okay. We could talk about that for a while, David. But I will say that you're right. And what he's referring to is he's referring to the adult to jack ratio. It's 65,000 jacks is one of the highest jack returns in years. I mean, decades, right? And we have all of these jacks come back. And historically, every jack that came back on an average would be around 18 to 20 adults the next year. So 65,000 jacks, historically, if you looked at the model, would produce like 1.2 million fish in the ocean for the next year. So that's why his comment is correct. It's frustrating because it's like, what do you mean? 65,000 jacks means there's a ton of fish out in the ocean. Yes, it does mean there's a lot more fish out in the ocean, because those 2-year-olds that came back, the 65,000 of them, that's a small percentage of the pie that decided to come back at 2, means there's a bigger, way bigger percentage of the pie out there. It's 3-year-olds. And then remember, a percentage of the pie that's still out there is 3-year-olds. A percentage will stay in the ocean and turn into 4-year-olds and decide not to come in until they're 4. I'd love to say I hope to see some fish come back at 5, but it's pretty rare in the Sacramento system now. I know that there are some, but it's pretty rare, and I'm hoping that we can try to figure out how to build back that genetic diversity to get back more older, bigger, 50-pound plus fish. And the Klamath still has some 5-year-olds coming back. So if we look at those numbers of returns and what that would mean on the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that would return to the river this year, and you look at that jack rate that David is mentioning, the ratio is all the way down into the 6s now. Because if you take 392,000 abundance and you divide it by 65,000 jacks, it gives you that 6 point whatever average. So now you're saying that historically the Sacramento River used to produce 18 to 20 adults the following year according to the jack ratio. And that number dwindled down a little bit into the first closure. It got as low as 11 to 1. And then it started going back up. But then it started dropping again. And last year we got all the way down to 9 to 1. So now some of you might say, well, okay, well, explain that to me. Well, this is one of the metrics that I've used for years in comparing how do I figure out the ocean abundance before they tell us. And that's one of the ways I do it, is looking at that jack ratio and looking at what that means for the future. But last year we used a 9 to 1, right? It was 19,000 jacks, and it was like 8.8 because it ended up at like 176,000 fish were around last year, which was like a 9.2 ratio. So how did we drop from 9.2 all the way down to the 6s this year? And I think that's what David's talking about. Because if you would, I think we paused, everyone, so sorry about that. And it might have been a little delay. I am here. But if we would have used a ratio of 9 fish to the 65,000 jacks, well, then you can start seeing that puts us at that 550,000 abundance. That's a lot more than 392. as you all remember, I told you all my guess before the year started was somewhere between 400 and 600,000. I was guessing at 5. I thought there was a little bit more fish out there. I still do. I still think there's a little bit more out there, but I think that there's no way for the federal and state government to control us to make sure that we don't go over a certain number to put other stocks in jeopardy. So I think that's why they're doing that. Hopefully that answers that, David, but that was a great question. Chris Iverson, good to see you, sir. It's good seeing you last week. Commercial angler, a lot put on the 4-year-old fish that had to survive dam removal when the rest of the coastal rivers didn't have the silt coming down. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And I think that that's why we're going to be in big trouble next year on the Klamath. It's because of that dam removal and all that silt and sediment that we told everyone was going to happen, and everyone said, oh, no big deal, no big deal. I think that that killed off a cohort, and we might see that next year. So if we see a low amount of jacks return to the Klamath River this year, we could be in even more trouble on the Klamath next year, which then will affect us accessing ocean time commercially and recreationally, which is a real bummer because we're just getting out of these problems with the Sacramento River, and now here we are having some issues with the Klamath again. But I think that the Klamath is going to be in trouble next year. It's my prediction and other biologists' predictions is that because of that dam removal 2024, we could see problems in the fall of 27 and the fall of 28 on returns. So hopefully, hopefully we're wrong, but you're correct, Chris. All that stress on those 4-year-olds on the Klamath really hurt it, and we're going to have to find ways to stay away from those fish the best as possible the next couple of years. And hopefully by the time we get to 2029, we're going to be able to access a lot of Klamath fish and a lot of sackfish and a lot of mokefish. Richard, you also didn't have the fishery shut down for going on 3 years, so all the returns last year and the year before were subsequent.